Abba-dabby dude! Hi there, this is Abba-dabby dude. Welcome back, and it's episode 2 of the IPace Drivers show today. I'll shortly be joined by Garry, and we'll go through a bit of news and then a lot of talk about the latest update to the IPace, the H264 update, which Jaguar are calling the range update, but it does a whole lot more besides that. But more of that in just a minute once I get chatting to Garry. So without any further ado, let's get that Skype call placed.
Hello and welcome.
Good day and welcome. Yes, it's IPace Drivers show number 2.
It is indeed. I'm IPace owner Garry, and
Abba-dabby dude.
I had to get you to say that.
Thank you. Yep.
So as usual, we'll start with the news, and I guess the main news, which is also the feature of this program, is H264 has been released. That's the range update, not the charging update, which some people got confused with. But so that's still to come at some point, maybe.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a bit about that later. So some other news, though, I think we might as well cover while we're here. I don't know if you've seen, but A Better Route Planner have issued an app today.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Both for Android and iOS. I've just been playing a bit with the Android version.
And I've been playing with the iOS one.
Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but I found a problem with the units.
Yes.
You change units in the profile, but they don't seem to be reflected in the plan.
Well, I don't know about the Android one, but on the iOS one, what happens is you change the units in the preferences, as you say, but it changes the plan. As in, if you put in a route with multiple waypoints, each section between waypoints, it gives you the distance, for example, in my case, in miles. But the overall journey distance is in kilometers.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I've got as well. I think, looking at, just having a quick look, that's exactly what I'm seeing as well. So I got kilometers as the main thing. Okay, that's a slight bug. They'll just need to sort
it out. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get a day one release with 0 bugs. So
no, but it's pretty impressive, I have to say.
I thought so. The only thing I didn't like about it is that on the website you can manually input a state of charge to charge to.
Yes, you can't do that on this version.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to let you override its settings, so it's very difficult then to. For example, it might give you 2 charging stops of 35% each, where I would rather do 1 charging stop with 70% maybe on it, and you can't set it. You don't seem to be able to do that on the app where you can on the website.
I guess these things will come. I mean, they're not taking the website away. You still can use the mobile version of the website.
Exactly.
So you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
There goes my earphone. Let's put that back in. So I can
Hearing aid fell out.
Hearing, yeah. Well, at least this way I can monitor what the microphone's doing. So if we see problems,
so far so good, though.
So far so good, yeah. So hopefully we sorted out the issues from last edition. Other bits of news. Obviously, we've had quite a few releases of WhatCat since the last time we had a show.
Yes.
So this is the Android alternative to Jaguar's remote app. Perhaps sort to talk a bit about Jaguar's remote app as well, because there's been a few issues with that over the last few months, connectivity, etc., which seem to be mainly back end. I don't know from your point of view on the iPhone, but from my side, it seems to be resolved now. The Android version seems to be reasonably stable.
Yeah, I must admit, I didn't have as many issues. Some people were having, it ran on for weeks on end. With mine, I had it for maybe 3 or 4 days where it wasn't reporting journeys. And then another probably 3 or 4 days where it always seemed to be a journey behind.
Yep.
So like I would go from home to work, the app would show me being at home. I would then drive from work to home and the app would show me being at work. But then that was only 3 or 4 days and it sorted itself out. And since then, for me, it's been relatively stable. There's been a couple of times where I've had issues connecting, but not many. Like you say, it seems back end.
Yeah.
But it does seem odd that some people seem to be more plagued with problems than others. You would think everyone would have the same.
You would, indeed. Although maybe they're hitting different servers. It's always possible.
Always possible, yeah.
Load balancing and all that sort of stuff. So going back to WhatCat, love this app. It's really good.
It is
I did
phenomenal.
on the forums, done a fabulous job of it. He's added a few new features to it. He's got the journeys now being shown properly. Obviously had charge logging and things on there before. Added a few more details to the details screen. Some of the remote control options now work as well, so you can do climate control and things like that. It's just a brilliant app, really, and it's so nicely laid out as well. It just looks good. It looks really good.
I agree, and I like. I don't know if I can't remember if I mentioned this to you before or not, Gary, but I actually bought a cheap Android phone, partly for WhatCat and partly for this other app that I'm messing around with, which pulls data from the OBD port. And I've been using that, so I have now finally used WhatCat. And I love things like the details page, where it gives you an awful lot of information about your vehicle. Stuff that you don't really need, but it's kind of nice to see with your,
Well, the one I do like on there is the 12-volt battery state.
That's what I was about to say. That's incredibly useful, though it does seem to have some issues with the figures it comes back with. I don't think they're 100% spot on yet. I think it needs some fine tuning there.
Well, I think that's the API generally.
Exactly, yeah.
And we'll talk a bit more about that with 264 as well. But one thing I do like about on it is the ability on it to set wake up times, which does seem to work.
Yes, it does. I've noticed wake up time. By wake up times, do you mean when you're away for more than 4 days?
The deep sleep stuff. So because the one on the other app, I've had a few problems where it's not woken up when I've returned from trips. Was this one every single time it works? So I mean, it should be using the same API. I can't see why it'd be different.
That doesn't make sense, but then so many things don't. But yeah, and what I like as well is that he's managed to incorporate almost all the functionality of the Jaguar app, but added a whole lot more besides. And you just think, why does it require a third party to do this?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing which a lot of people like, which I don't actually use myself, is you can set a max state of charge.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit flaky because it does rely on your phone keeping the app running and not shutting it down and things like that.
Yeah.
But that works well. And there was one bit of controversy with the battery health side he had on there, which obviously as we'll talk about the H264 update, but that messes up the API for that figure. So the state of charge was completely wrong. So he's now hidden that, and you can turn it on if you want to, which I think is a very good way of doing it. But he's a great guy, and he's certainly stuff. Hopefully we'll get him on one of the shows shortly. I've been talking.
That would be good, yeah.
So shall we talk H264?
Let us talk H264.
So H264 is the range update, and actually, I was going to say that letters should be going out to people. I don't think any letters have actually gone out yet.
I was just discussing this the other day with somebody, and he hasn't had a letter. Neither of us have heard of anybody saying they've had a letter.
Maybe the dealers are pushing back on Jaguar, saying, "Don't send them out. We're too busy. We're too busy."
Do you know? I actually think, and I might be wrong on this, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that dealers are holding it back till after Christmas, New Year.
Would make sense. I mean, they're busy up. They're short-staffed and busy up to Christmas, so
exactly
they may now not want that to go out to public knowledge.
Yeah.
Although obviously it has snuck out there. I might have told a few people about it.
I may have mentioned it occasionally.
Occasionally. So what does the H264 update give us?
Well, interestingly, it gives us an awful lot, I feel, and I think it's slightly disingenuous when people, and that sounds like I'm having a go at you now because you just described it as the range update.
Well, that's what Jaguar call it. So.
That's what Jaguar call it, but it's slightly disingenuous, I feel, to just call it that, because it underplays a lot of the stuff that it does over and above the range. I know that range is the thing that everybody is fascinated with and locked into focusing on with EVs generally, and the IPace, is no exception to that. But it does so many other things as well, as you say. I mean, some of them improves the range, improves the regen. Now that in part helps towards the range, but that's not the be all and end all of the regen improvement. It actually makes it more drivable with regen. Which is one of the things that I was particularly pleased with, which we'll go on to discuss in a minute. But You had information about the suspension as well?
Yeah, so this is I didn't actually get this from Jaguar, so this has come from quite a few of my viewers. Have all said that they felt that the suspension, the air suspension, had improved. Now I have heard that handling was improved in some of the modes, so maybe that's a knock on from that.
Yeah.
And so, but what I found is the stability over rough ground is much better. So my car had this habit of sort of going side to side. If you go over a bump on the right side, it would start going that and then come back and settle itself. But except before, it didn't settle itself. It would keep going like that for a little while, rocking the boat type thing. Yeah. But now it just settles. It hits once.
Can I ask what mode you're in for that? Did it?
Well, that would have been on the middle mode of the air suspension, sort of not that.
No, but I mean driving mode, is that?
Oh, drive mode. Yeah, be eco. Most of the time I drive in eco. And I flick it to sport occasionally, but most of the time I drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that used to be definitely the case. It used to do this sort of side to side motion, but now it just hits once and it does one and then it sort of settles and it's okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I've not seen anything in the release notes. My contacts aren't saying anything about it, but it definitely seems to be there. I mean, I've had this. I mean, when I spoke to you about this earlier, I was a bit concerned it might be just me getting confirmation bias because obviously I'd
easy to happen.
Heard about this from other people but I actually took someone in the car the other week who's often complained of feeling slightly seasick in the car that we go over a certain piece of road, and they said they immediately commented on how much better the car was.
Yeah.
So without being prompted, they didn't even know it had been updated. So there's obviously something there.
My personal first instinct when I drove the car afterwards was in eco mode. That's why I asked you about which mode you felt it was in. In eco mode, my air suspension, and like you say, it could be confirmation bias, but it definitely feels noticeably firmer in eco mode.
Settled, I think. Yeah. So the other thing they have done in eco mode is they've split the torque between the front and rear drive, especially when you're at cruising speed at 70 miles an hour on the motorways. So I noticed today when I was driving that there's actually a slightly different tone to the motors when that's doing that. Not unpleasant. It's noticeable that it is slightly different. That definitely makes a huge difference on the range, as we'll discuss in a minute.
Yeah.
But the other thing which I've had commented to me a few times is about throttle response, and I've actually had this confirmed now that they've actually adjusted the way the throttle works. So you're not able to accelerate any faster. It's just they've moved the way where the throttle is, the logarithm on the throttle. So it feels like you get a bit more oomph as you put your foot down in eco, and particularly in sport. In sport, it's very noticeable.
Interesting you say that. I'll check this out, but via my OBD port, I can get you can get a digital response, and at the moment, the throttle position range, or I say at the moment, prior to H264, the throttle position range only went from 0 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see if they've varied.
That would be definitely interesting to get that stat. So that there's a lot of things going on here. Now the other thing which has happened in this one is some updates to the way charging works. Not an improvement in charging speed, because obviously that's one which hasn't come, but the actual way charging starts. Now, this is a bit of a workaround for some of the tolerance issues that we talked about the CCS charge standard last time. It's just not a standard. So Jaguar are following it to the letter. Other people may not be following it to the letter quite so much. I think they've toned back a bit on that letter. Because today I was able to charge on one of the NGNE chargers, which had previously caused me an issue.
Yeah.
Now, interesting, I got a full charge of it, no problem at all. But when I went to unplug, I did actually get a high voltage warning, which is interesting. So, but before I was getting a high voltage warning as soon as I plugged it in. So I wonder if the isolation check is only happening at the end. But
possible.
So maybe that's a little bit more tweaking to be done there. But the fact is, I can charge now a load more chargers.
I mean, I have yet to do my Charge Play Scotland exploration trip. I've got the video planned for that sometime between Christmas and New Year. We're going to go out and film that. Be the exact same route as I've done before. However, at the weekend, which will come up when we're discussing range as well. But at the weekend, I did a 280-mile round trip. Not a road trip for a video. It was a Christmas shopping trip. I was picking my parents up from home, so I didn't want to be, sitting being Abu Dhabi dude for vast chunks of the journey. So it wasn't videoed. But I used an Ingenie charger, which I've used on one video which has already been published, which I think was the House of Dunn video. And I used it again on one which is still in the edit phase, but should be coming out fairly soon. So I've used that charger twice. Both times it wouldn't charge the car until I rebooted the charger. But on Saturday, I used that same charger again and deliberately didn't reboot it just to see. And it started first time. Now, it's very, it's hardly a wall of evidence. But that one charger, at least on that one occasion, started. Could have been a fluke, but I'll find out more, as I say, once I do my Charge Play Scotland trip.
Now, what was also interesting is, I know you've got the magic car which can charge on electricity. We all know that. but my magic car isn't able to charge on electricity normally, and certainly was not used to be able to charge on electricity at the extra services at Peterborough. I tried that yesterday and it charged absolutely fine the first time.
Wow.
So they've obviously done something.
A few other people say the same thing. I've got a Scottish group of owners that we're all part of a WhatsApp group. And there's a few of them on there that have commented as well.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some improvements on charging. To me, it seems to ramp up slower, which is one thing I did say before. It was a change I didn't really want because it means we all end up charging slower. I know there's some discussion going on at the moment whether it's better. Some drivers have been asked this by Jaguar, so whether it's better to have faster charging or more reliable charging. Which would you prefer?
Are you allowed to say both?
Yeah, I'd like both, but it may not be possible to have both in some circumstances. So
yeah, no.
Maybe that's something viewers can comment on below, because I think it's definitely an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what people think of that. Actually, I think for me personally, I would actually, if I had to choose one out of the two, I would probably say more reliable.
I think if I could have more reliable and the peak speed I can get when I have reliable charging. So if I could get that sort of 100 kilowatt on a 150 kilowatt charger for that first 5 or 6 minutes, and then go down to 80 kilowatts and keep at that across the board, which I got a couple of times on Ionity chargers before. Yeah, I'd be really happy with that if it was reliable. And I don't really need to have 120 kilowatt peak. I think 100 kilowatt peak is fine as long as it's consistently over a reasonable time. And
exactly. I mean, my Ionity video, which I know you've seen, if I had been able to, if I could get that level of charge all the time, and it was nothing like the claimed 0 to 80 in 40 minutes or whatever it is, but I was getting, I went from 18 to 80 in 43 minutes. And that, in all honesty, I was very pleased with that at the time. I've had slower charges since then on Ionity. So personally, I'm with you. If I could get that kind of figure, sustain that 100 for a little bit longer, maybe, as you say, 5 or 6 minutes, that would bring that charging time down to probably about 45 minutes for, let's say, 10 to 80%, I would think.
That'd be really good. Now, the other thing H264 does bring is some improvement for charging in cold weather, which is noticeable.
Yeah. I, again, charged, obviously on Saturday on that road trip that we did, charged twice in the end. And it felt quicker, but not massively so.
No.
But they were 50 kilowatt chargers, so.
Yeah, so I can only go, and it is slightly uncomparable because the weather was slightly different. So I did one lot charging in 4 degrees, one lot charging in 8 degrees. So obviously that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
But prior to H264, on one particular charger, I got 24 kilowatt charging average across the charge.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I got about 38 kilowatts, which is still not good enough, but it's better. It's getting better.
It's a big improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to try when the weather drops again just to do that check.
But I mean, I'd like to do that Ionity test again, because I did a cold weather Ionity charge where I got a peak of 42 kilowatts.
I know. I think I contacted you when I was doing one charge where I was getting 30 kilowatt peak on Ionity, which is definitely down to being cold. Now, Jack Tammers on the Facebook forum did suggest to me I did a bit of fast acceleration before I get to a charger, just to warm things up a bit, and that definitely makes a difference. That gained about 5 kilowatts on the charging.
Yeah. I mean, I've got the capacity to check what the battery temperature is at any given time, and I was arriving at that Ionity with battery at 19 degrees. Yeah. So it should have been better.
Yeah. I'm told it's around 30 degrees. You need to have the battery temperature out to get good decent charging. So, which is quite tricky to get without the battery being heated.
Indeed, yeah.
So anyway, that's definitely an improvement. I mean, I certainly noticed today on that NG&E charger, I was getting 42 peak, which I don't usually get anywhere near that on that type of NG&E charger. That's one of the options. On the APB chargers, I often get 48 peak. But what was really interesting, I was driving an MG ZS EV at the weekend.
Oh, nice.
And I actually got higher peak charging on that than I do on the IPace. But I know what MG did was basically they went around to every charger in the country and adjusted their software to match that rather than following the standard.
Yeah.
so it's an interesting one. I mean, I've said this before. I can imagine Jaguar Legal going, hang on. So you're tweaking away from the CCS standard. What happens if someone gets electrocuted?
Yeah.
How are we going to hold that up? Yeah, so I can see why they want to follow the standard as close as they can. Absolutely. Okay, so let's get on to the meat of this thing then. So the range update.
Yep. Actually, just before we do that, there's one little extra thing I want to discuss. Which is the layout of the dash, the graphics.
Oh yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, as I said to you the other day, the Atari video game.
The Atari video game. Yes. Now, I must admit, when I first got it back, and I'd seen pictures of it before when this was first aired about 6 months ago, 5-6 months ago, I think a few people got that dashboard upgrade, let's call it. And when I got my car back with it, initially I thought, no, I don't like it. But it is actually, to read, I find it's much easier to read. It's much easier to get a good estimation of your state of charge at a glance.
It is. Yeah, the other thing I noticed today when I was charging is if you've got the car switched on, often you have no visual indicator of the car's actually charging. Yeah. But it does actually dynamically update that charge while you're charging, so you see the blobs going up.
Okay.
Nice. I quite like that. But you're right, you can see it better at the glance, which was the whole point of it. And they also wanted to de-emphasize the range.
Yeah.
Because it is just an estimate. State of charge is real. So if you know you've done half your battery and you've done 100 miles, you're likely to be able to do 100 miles.
You've got a good chance of having 100 miles left, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's really quite good. The only one, and my friend Nigel mentioned this to me the other day, when it's great on single, it's okay on single dial. On dual dial, it looks really odd because you've got the massive mile per hour side one side, and then you've got this little tiny range on the other side with the bar. It looks quite unbalanced. Yeah. So aesthetically, I can see the challenges there, but it definitely works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I use one dial almost exclusively. Sometimes I have the full map, but for general day-to-day driving.
Again, before we go on to the range, there's another thing we should mention there is the changes to the layout, which you can do in one dial now.
Yes.
Because one of my favourite things of the whole update is the fact I can now have my trip meter on my left-hand side of the screen and the map on the right side. And that's changed completely the way I use the car almost.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I had the media information on the left panel, even though it's down on the lower touch screen. Yeah. Just because I didn't want to have nothing there, and the driver assist is practically useless when you've got the HUD.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I used to have driver HUD assist there, but with the HUD, you really didn't need it.
Yeah.
And you still get some driver assist indication of the trip meter there. You can still see if it's on and the steering.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, and it will switch to it when you want to adjust things like the distance ahead. But
question for you as well. Now, I don't know if this is my failing memory, but certainly on the single dial display, when you're in the different drive modes, you always had a coloured circle around the outside of the dial.
Yeah.
So it was green for eco, blue for comfort, red for dynamic, plus the white band for dynamic. But I checked one of my old videos, and it wasn't overly clear on it, but it looked like the actual needle itself was pure white. But now the needle is white, but there's a stripe down the middle of it, which is also green, blue, or red.
I think that's changed as well. I don't think it's necessarily changed in this update, but because someone else has posted something on the forum, on the Facebook post about it, who's not had the H264 yet.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering if it came with one of the SOTA updates, but you wouldn't think that would affect that console. It shouldn't be able to.
Because you have to. The dashboard cluster needs a dealer visit.
It does, it does indeed. So I don't know. Maybe it's maybe they had the dashboard update separately before, because that was actually out there in the wild.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So maybe that's why it is, and maybe it is H264 with that update. Whatever they call that center console.
Yeah, I know. IPC or
IPC, yeah. So it's got some strange internal name.
It does, yeah. But it was just one of those things. It took me a while to pin it down, because I'm looking at it and thinking something's changed.
Yeah, something's different.
Yeah.
The same with the HUD. I had to get back to my video of the HUD to check this out. But when you haven't got driver assist running, the way it displays the lanes is now different. Slightly fuzzy lane type marking.
Do you know, you're saying that, and I didn't twig, but when I was driving with it on Saturday, I was looking at the HUD and thinking, or looking specifically at the driver assist and thinking, that doesn't look right. And then I convinced myself that it was just because it wasn't picking up the lanes at that moment in time. And I just thought, oh, it's probably the same as it's always been. So now you've said that, that's probably what I was seeing before.
Yeah, and I think it does make a bigger distinction between when it's on and when it's off. So it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, but yes. I still wish it would give you a noise, but let's move on from that.
I think I'd like it if it was a noise. I'd like it optional. Having driven the MG, which is notorious for the number of bongs it gives out.
Yes, I've heard that.
So I did a journey from Peterborough to Hinckley, and it gave 68 bongs in the time I drove from Peterborough. And they're all double bongs every time you change lane, every time it switches off, dong 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 dong, and it's really loud as well. And MG call them chimes. So the only chimes I've ever come close to that is Big Ben. But yeah, so I'd rather not have bongs all the time or beeps. Yeah. But if it's optional, I don't mind. And to be fair to MG, they are sorting that out as well. They're very proactive.
Yeah.
So there is going to be an update in the new year which will fix that.
Anyway, let's
get on to the range, because this is
the big point of this.
Yeah. So Jaguar claiming 8% range increase. I think I've seen slightly more than that.
I have definitely seen more than that.
So I did a quite long journey today, and I've worked out on the average of what I've seen today, my full charge would be about 234 miles, genuine.
Right.
Whereas
I'm on the 22s.
Yeah.
Obviously, 22-inch wheels for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, which are notoriously range consuming.
Indeed, yeah.
But I am getting a fairly consistent, now that I've used it for a fair distance, at the moment it's reporting 224 on a full charge.
Yeah.
But anywhere between 220 and 230 on a full charge, which I think, if you remember our last video, I said the one thing that would make me really happy would be if I could get 200 miles in the winter.
Yeah. So we would have been happy with just 200 miles in the winter.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely getting more than that. Now, one thing I have noticed is that today my range adjusted down quite rapidly when I started driving over a longer distance. I don't think it's been adjusting at all, I guess, while I've been doing my little short runs I do most days. because most days I'm doing 5-mile runs, and they consist of about 30 seconds at 30, and then the 2 minutes at 70, and then the rest at 30.
Yeah.
So, which is absolutely the worst thing possible for range. It's not.
Yeah, you'd be getting a range of 100 miles reported or something.
Yeah. Well, actually, the trip meter was showing 58 kilowatt hours to 100 miles.
Wow, and you don't use dynamic mode.
Yeah, and that was economy. So but you do. It's all that startup cost. I mean, we know when you start a journey, so it's only really realistic when you start going on longer journeys.
Exactly.
So when I kicked off this journey today, I lost 40 miles fairly rapidly.
Okay.
Over 20 miles. So I lost 20 miles. I lost 20 miles in range in a 20-mile journey.
Right.
Over what I should have done. So I actually used 40 miles. And then
there's some people who think that's a really alarming thing, but I think that's a really good thing personally, because that was one of my slight issues before, was I felt it just didn't accurately reflect your range until you'd done a good, I mean, it was 100%, it was a 500-mile sample it was taken. Yeah. So you weren't getting a really good representation until you'd done about 250, 300 miles.
Yeah, and it was also 500 miles rolling over your journey. So if you did a lot of short journeys and then did a long journey, you were getting a completely skewed figure on the long journey. So today was actually really interesting, because it started off with a range which would have been about 260 in total, and gradually went down to about a range which would have been about 210, and then it started going back up again.
Oh.
So I think initially it just adjusted down because I was driving. I obviously started a journey, got over length of time, still that startup period, and then I gradually I started I had a long 70-mile-an-hour stretch in eco running on, and I was getting something phenomenal on that. I mean, obviously the instant power is a bit difficult to actually keep an eye on, but I've never seen it down to 10, 20 when I've been on 70 mile an hour.
No.
Even on, and this wasn't downhill, this was on flat, so it was just getting some momentum and and that trip actually averaged at 38 kilowatt hours per 100 miles, which is pretty good.
I think that's impressive at this time of year.
Anything under 40, anything under 40 is amazing.
Exactly, yeah.
And because we're now, so the other thing we should mention is we're able to use a bit more of the battery now than we were before.
Yeah.
So whereas before we were effectively able to use 82 kilowatts, we're now able to use 84 kilowatts. Plus and minus a bit.
In round numbers, yeah.
In round numbers, there's a plus and minus a bit there.
Yeah.
So that's basically by allowing you to go a bit lower in the tank and using a bit of bob.
Exactly.
So if you think about that, that means that if anything under 40 and under, you're effectively going to get 200 miles.
Exactly, yeah.
And I don't think I've seen any long journey I've ever done where the car's done more than 40 since I've had the H264.
No. Even, I mean, my journey, as I was saying to you prior to doing the video, my journey on Saturday was up into the Highlands. So the way there obviously was a lot of uphill. And I was still getting, the 40, just over 40. I would have to look up the number, but it was about 42.
Which is really good for going up hills.
Yeah.
Those sort of hills anyway.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, some of those are hills.
Yeah, not my sort of hills.
Yeah. So I was very impressed with the performance of it in terms of range.
So I think there are a couple of negatives. One you've got, which I'm not seeing quite so much, but I'm wondering if that's actually because I haven't done multiple step journeys. So let's talk about your state of charge issue.
Okay. Right. Now, I'll drop in on my video. I'll drop in some screenshots while I talk about this. You've already seen them, so
I might be able to drop them in as well, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And, so people will know what we're talking about. But when I did the trip, by luck, if luck is the right word, I tried to do the same journey the week before. And thanks to a Scottish pothole. Your pothole damage was something to behold. It was, yeah. So my Pirelli P0 got wiped out. Luckily, the wheel wasn't damaged, but the Pirelli got damaged to the point where it was still drivable, but I wasn't about to do a 280-mile journey on it. So we abandoned it and did it the following week. In between the two trips, H264 was applied to the car. So I actually had, interestingly, I had the journey plan with the predicted state of charge for the old trip and for the new trip, identical trips, and could therefore do a direct comparison. But I was getting some very strange numbers. So it was 140 miles there, 140 miles back. Prior to H264, my car was saying I would arrive there with 19% state of charge.
Yep.
After H264, it was saying I would arrive with 40%. Now, that seemed like when you're talking about 8% range increase, that's suddenly an order of magnitude above that. But we set off anyway, and it was a strange system, but it was the very last leg of a 4-leg journey. I had 4 waypoints on the journey, the last one being the destination. The first 2 legs, or the first 3 legs, were fairly accurate, but the last one was really badly out, like severely out. And then on the way back, so we ended up arriving on that final leg. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it was 29% I was supposed to use, or 24% I was supposed to use, but we used about 38 or 39%. I'll correct that with a caption at the bottom once I've done the arithmetic afterward. But the point was that on that final, fairly short part of the journey, we used way more electricity than we were supposed to such an extent that where I charged up and was supposed to get back to the charger with loads of charge, I ended up with a low battery warning and getting back to it with about 7%.
And that's not good, because we've mentioned this before, that state of charting on the map is one of the best things they introduced.
Yeah,
and
it used to be so accurate.
Yeah.
But anyway, that wasn't really the issue I had. So, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I needed to do the intro, to explain how it worked on the way there. But it's now doing this very strange thing, and it did it on the way back. It was the first time it did it was on the way back from that trip. And I tested it today, and again, I'll put up the screenshots to show you. But basically, when I'm doing the planning, for example, if I sit down now and planned it on the sat nav in the car, it will come up and it will say that I'm going to arrive at 40%.
Yeah.
I then set off, and within minutes of setting off, that drops to 11%.
Yeah, that's worrying. Now, I did a couple of journeys today, and I tested doing state of charge on mine, and I didn't see that, which is interesting. But I wasn't doing multi-step journeys, so I'm wondering if that's something to do with it.
It almost felt like that was what it was down to. It would be possibly interesting to just do it as a single journey to destination and see what it comes up with. But it's a very odd phenomenon, because it just suddenly, like in the blink of an eye, all the numbers change quite dramatically downwards.
Now we know that the navigation system is supplied by a separate company. It's here. Apps. We also know that the entertainment system is on a separate set of updates. We've had a 19C update, but I didn't mention anything for IPace really.
Yeah.
I know there's likely to be a 20A update in the new year. I wonder if they're going to address some of the stuff, because one thing I do know is that the API is now wrong for a lot of figures. Talking about Wildcat earlier, that was the reason he had the problems with the health figures, because they're completely wrong after the update, and that's partly because it no longer knows what size the battery is. Yeah, because it's all the calculations seem to still be done on the 82 kilowatts, whereas actually it's actually 84. And I wonder if that's the same thing here, that we're not getting quite the full range allowed. But that doesn't really explain why it works for some and not for others, doesn't it?
Exactly, and it also kind of doesn't explain the sudden drop, unless it's using assumed figures for the planning calculations, and then it's getting the real figures after a couple of minutes, and it's thinking that you've used that much. So it's suddenly, you see what I mean?
Yeah, you suddenly get real usage figures, because we are
Because the weird thing is neither of the two figures was accurate.
Yeah, that's the worst thing, isn't it?
The before one had me getting there with way more state of charge than I would have, and the after one had me getting there with way less.
Yeah.
So it almost, and I'm just thinking this through now, but that's almost what it feels like, is it suddenly thinks, oh, hang on, I've gone from this much to this much very quickly. He must be using 60 kilowatt hours per 100 miles or something,
Yeah.
and suddenly revises all the figures. But it didn't do it on the way there. It started doing that on the way back.
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly see that from a cold start, you might actually have a very high consumption for the first few minutes, which, if it was reacting instantly, would be a problem. But it's never done that in the past, so why would it suddenly start doing that?
Interesting, because on the way there, I preconditioned.
Yeah.
And it didn't do it on the way there.
That's worth a test.
Yeah.
And obviously, when I did my test today, I'd been driving for quite some time before I started using state of charge, because I've been testing out the new Android Auto beta I've got. For that point, and I didn't see any issues with it.
Yeah.
That in fact, that was more accurate than the guessometer was on the way back.
Yeah.
Interesting. On the way back, I did play a bit, because I came across this wonderful piece of road which was sort of rolling hills and corners, and you could see for miles, so you knew if anything was coming. So you could play a bit around. You had to play on the corner, and that really threw the guessometer. It dropped like a stone from that, because it suddenly. What's he doing? He doesn't drive like this normally. Which I think is something. I always get this, because people expect that meter to be accurate.
Oh, I know.
And how can it possibly be accurate? It's only going to be as good as you're driving. It's almost.
Exactly.
I guess the only time it would ever be accurate is if you were all your driving was done on adaptive cruise control, and you just let the car drive. Then it would have a fairly good degree of knowledge of it as to.
Yeah, and even then, it would have to be on a really boring road.
Yeah, the same road, every flat, no corners, straight
no corners, motorway or whatever, dual carriageway. Yeah,
but I think now it does a really good job.
Yeah,
because other than when I did that bit playing, up to then it had been absolutely spot on. After the initial bit where it had done all the adjustment, for the next 40 miles or so, it was absolutely spot on, mile for mile. I was using what it was saying I was using on the.
That's what I notice now, is that it's very rare for it to do that, sudden drop thing where you think, I've just done 10 miles and it's saying I've used 20 miles.
Yeah.
Which is difficult for people to get their heads around, because they think that means they've used 20 miles of the battery. It's quite a difficult concept to grasp when you're new to EVs. But it doesn't seem to do that so much now. It's much more consistent at tracking your mileage, so which is why I believe the 230 mile range report, because when I do 40 miles on that, it drops by about 40 to 42, 43 miles,
So, I mean, the other thing, I've never seen this. Even in summer, I get to 50%. I've still got over 112 miles range left. I mean, that's just like, even back in the summer days when I used to get 220, 230 predicted, I would never get that reality.
No, exactly. When we arrived in the Highlands with 48%, and again, I'll drop the screenshot in, but from memory, I think at 48%, it was reporting 110 miles of range.
Crazy.
In winter, it was the temperature on the way there was fairly consistent between 2, never got above 5, and never got below 2, so between 2 and 5 degrees.
Oh, you really can't argue with that.
Exactly.
Hopefully our Norwegian friends are happier now as well, because that's obviously one of the main reasons for this update has been their issues with charging.
Exactly, yeah.
In the cold, so yeah.
I mean they have winters.
They definitely have winters.
But yeah, other than that, and I'm hoping this is just a little glitch. I'm not kicking up a fuss about this little issue. Well, it could be a big issue if you over relied on it, but with the state of charge, it's only on the sat nav. It's just for the viewers, it's when you have that route remaining display on the sat nav. So the left third of your sat nav, or the right third if you're driving in Europe or America, but that portion of the screen shows you your state of charge now, your predicted state of charge at your next waypoint, the waypoint after that, and your destination. So the car is predicting what your state of charge is going to be at the end of your journey, or at each waypoint, in fact, on your journey. So that's the issue. It's not the GOM, it's that sat nav prediction of and prior to H264, for me, and I know for you, Gary, because we talked about this, it was very, very accurate.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this is going to be a short-term glitch, and that once the car gets acclimatized, if you like, to the new consumption figures and the new available range of the battery, I'm hoping that it will just start to adjust itself to the right figures. But it's not something I've heard people kicking off about.
Yeah, I don't know how many people actually use it. I mean, I know we do because
Yeah.
it's such a good thing, and particularly for the planning side of things, it's the best way of planning. Well,
Yeah,
it isn't the best way now, but it was the best way of planning. So I think that it will be nice to see that fixed. I was saying about 28, but the other thing is it may be just an API change. I don't know how he actually get that information. You kind of think they might have to pull it across from the API somehow. Whether they've got a direct link to the car for that, I don't know how those systems interact.
Yeah, well, I guess the exact state of charge, and it updates it very quickly. See, the API is quite a slow responding.
Yeah, it is.
API.
So you would think it must be.
It must be actually drawn it direct from the onboard diagnostic system, I think.
Yeah, that's got. I guess navigation systems do have ins to those, so
yeah,
would make some sense. You could do that.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, as I say, it's a glitch which I would rather wasn't there, but it's not something I want to make out to be a massive deal, because once you know, then you can work it around it. It's the first time it happens, it kind of catches you off guard a bit.
I kind of think I'd trade that for the range increase, actually.
Exactly. If that's the cost.
Yeah, if that's the cost. I'm hoping it's not the cost, but that's
yeah.
And I said to you the other day, this whole thing with H264, it's like Jaguar have given me a new car for Christmas. It's so different. It's not just minor tweaks. This is a big change.
Yeah, I mean it does. I mean, in fact, I was just saying that to somebody this morning. It feels like a new car. It really does.
Around.
And the Regen, I mean, we didn't even.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Regen, because this.
Yeah.
I mean, this to me is just the best one of the. Again, so there's two parts to this really. There's the fact that you can actually get Regen at a higher batch state of batch charge.
Yeah.
So you haven't got that you've got to 100%, and the car feels differently when you start driving it, because you haven't got any Regen. You've now got some Regen to play with at that point.
It still feels different, but it's less
different. Yeah. You still get a bit of Regen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Whereas before you quite often got so minimal.
It felt like no Regen.
And the other thing which they've done is they've improved the Regen at low speed.
Yeah.
And that's really noticeable. That's where you get the one pedal driving type of.
Exactly.
You can
bring the car to a stop now.
You can, yeah. As long as you're not on a hill, you're fine.
Yeah.
But if I'm flat, you can bring it to a stop quite easily. And I did several times a day when I was driving. So
yeah, I use it a lot.
Now, the other thing I actually have noticed is I'm getting a lot more kilowatts hours regened on the stats.
Yes, I've noticed that as well, because I'm like you, my commute is very short. My daily drive, if you like, is actually a really short drive. It's 7 miles there, 7 miles back. But it's a consistent 7 miles, so it's a good one to do these kind of comparisons with. But prior to H264, I would regularly regen almost without fail 0.6 kilowatt hours, and now I'm regenerating about 0.8.
Yeah, and I've actually seen something more than that. So on my little jaunt, which I do every day, so it's different one way to the other way, but the going outbound, I used to get 0.4 kilowatt hours regen. I'm now getting 0.8, so it's effectively doubled.
Yeah.
Now part of that is because on bits of it I used to have to use the brakes. I don't use the brakes at all now, so I'm regenerating to come to a halt on stuff. Now obviously it does change depending on whether the traffic lights are red or not.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there are obviously going to be variations, but because mine is fairly consistent.
But because I do that journey not just once a day. Probably I do 2 or 3 times a day, so I can get a good average on that, which I have been able to do. So dramatic improvement.
In fact, 0.9. Sorry, I just checked. So I was just checking while you were talking there. 0.9. I'm regenning.
Yeah, it's really good. Which obviously makes a huge difference. If you can. So today's journey, I gained 3.5 kilowatt hours on the battery, which is quite a few miles now.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. It's just a law of. It's almost a perpetual motion machine at times, but it becomes a situation where you regen more, which improves your range, but the amount you regen gets you more range because the car's more efficient anyway. So you get more regen and you get more range. Even if you regen the same amount, you would get more range from that. So you're regenning more and getting more range, and it just things like that all add up. They're all small improvements which add up to make quite a significant difference, in fact.
So we've had some great Christmas presents from JLR. I wonder what they're going to bring us in the new year to keep us happy.
Exactly, yeah. They've set the bar high now, so our expectations are through the roof. We need that. We want that every 3 months now, please, Joe.
Yeah. Yes, please. Oh, that's been good. Thanks for your time as ever.
Thank you for yours. It's been as enjoyable as ever. Well, as for me, I don't know about the viewers, but as for me.
Well, let's hope we can get the next show, and as I say, we'll try and get RDD on from who does the Quack app, because he's got an awful lot of knowledge, and will give us a different perspective as well, because he's obviously based out I think he's in Norway.
I'm pretty sure
good.
It is.
Yeah, good stuff. But
okay,
until then,
well, we'll try and get that set up for some time in the future.
Yeah,
and I'll catch you soon. We have no doubt we'll be chatting in the meantime anyway.
We will indeed. But to everybody out there who's watching this, as it's that time of year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a very happy and IPace New Year.
Indeed. I wish you many updates in the year to come.
It's great.
And of course, the same to you, Gary. Happy Christmas.
You too, yeah. You too, yes.
So there you have it. I think fair to say we're both suitably impressed by H264. And all I can say is reiterate, if you haven't done it, get it done. It takes about half a day and you'll never look back. It's like having a brand new car. It's the best Christmas best Christmas present Jaguar could have given us. So enjoy. Let me know your experiences down below, and if you've got any comments on the observations and hypotheses that we made during the video, then again leave them in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like it, and you can always subscribe. That's always much appreciated. And that's all there is to say, really. Till next time, this is Abba Dabby Dude saying so long, take care, see you soon. Bye. Abba Dabby Dude.